Yeah.
Right on, everybody. There's Rick Stojak doing the Tom King thing, man, down in San Diego. Everybody, welcome to Drummers Education Connection. Thank you so much for tuning in every week. We have a lot of loyal followers now. It's really nice. We refer to you guys as deck heads. So thank you for being a deck head. We really appreciate it. I'm here with three great friends. I already introduced them down in San Diego. Rick Stojak.
Welcome, everyone.
Down in Tucson, Arizona, Chip Ritter.
Hello.
Up in the Bay Area, Jeremy Steinkohler.
What's happening, everybody?
So we had a nice little behind the scenes thing I'll share with you here. We just had a really nice meeting. We got our next deck day coming up. That's coming up in April. Jeremy, what's the date on that?
Saturday, April 26th.
So we're kind of starting to put the word out there now. So if you guys have never been to Deck Day or you want to come to Deck Day, make your plans. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. We're starting to put it together now. It takes quite a bit of work to get this thing to happen. So we started it early. Anyway, so before we get started, we're going to do our normal thing. We got good things. And so I've got a lot of good things today. But before I hog it, let's just throw it down to Chip in Tucson. Let's go to you first, buddy. I know what your good thing is.
Hey, the Eagles kind of won the Super Bowl.
Kind of a little bit. They spanked them.
kind of won. We had a really good game. It was a fun time. Everybody, half of the people I love on Facebook are mad about the halftime show. The other half are happy, and I'm not going to get into it. I think music itself is beautiful, and to each his own. And so we had a great game, and I'm proud of everybody. All my Philly fans and my friends are really happy for me too. And so, yeah, that's my good thing. Philly won the Super Bowl. Go ahead, Jeremy. What's up?
Let's see. I think my good thing is that I'm really excited about Deck Day in April. We just spent an hour talking about it. We're getting all the stuff set up. We got loads of sponsorships coming in and gear that we're going to give away for free at Deck Day. All you have to do is show up, and I'm excited to hear what you guys got to offer clinic-wise. So yeah, it's going to be a really fun day. It's about April 26th. What's that? That's 2 months, 10 weeks away. Yeah.
10 weeks. Yeah.
So super looking forward to it.
Wow.
Rick, what do you got, buddy?
You know, I always enjoy driving on a Tuesday morning into the studio to do the show and teach. And I always listen to Fred Fisher's podcast for drummers, Drummer G, formerly Coffee with Fred. And Fred is just so damn entertaining, and his laugh is infectious. It just puts you in a good mood. And if you're a drummer, check out Drummer G's podcast. It's on the same platforms that Deck that you can find Deck. And I always learn a lot, and I get a big laugh. And Fred always has like the wacky holiday, like bizarre holiday of the day is. And you'd be surprised at how many wacky holidays there are. Today, I think he said it was Don't Cry Over Spilled Milk Day. Wacky.
There's no such thing. There's no such thing as that.
Exactly.
Spirits of the Dead Whales Day. Ancestors Spirits of the Dead Whales Day. I mean, there's crazy.
Fred's show today was really good. I enjoyed it too, and he gave us a big old shout out.
Oh,
so
nice.
We want to make sure we give Fred Fisher a good shout out too. Fred, it's great to see you on there. Thanks for watching our show too.
You know, Fred is such a great guy. He and I were on the phone the other day, and that's actually why I am sitting where I'm sitting instead of behind my drums. He gave me some pointers. He was like, "Hey man, I think you guys should do this, and the show should look this way." And so I was like, "You know what? I agree with you." So that's why I'm not behind my drums. I'm sitting out here today because of his little 2 cents that he threw in. I thought it was really cool. So that's why I'm sitting out here today. I have so many great things. I was really happy for Chip and his Philly win, the Eagles. That was awesome. I was really happy for a former Deck interviewee, the guy was on here, Tosh Peterson. He played the opening show with Lady Gaga the other day and
wow.
just absolutely crushed it and was on there. Tosh is playing those high level gigs and has been for years, and he's such a great guy. And he's become a good friend, and so him playing with Lady Gaga the other day was just so cool to see that. So that was really cool, and I had a great clinic this last week. Great master class over at Adam Parsons Drum Room. Had a fantastic time there. And this is kind of a biggie. So Adam is an investor, and he's very involved with WFL3 snare drums. And he has been with them for quite some time. And he's good friends with Bill Ludwig III. And he offered a great deal on snare drums at my master class. And even though I'm a Gretsch guy, a snare drum is an accessory. So I'm not like, doing anything weird. They're great drums. They're amazing drums. And so for today's show, any of you guys watching today's show, not the aftermath and seeing it on YouTube or something like that, but for today's show, if you want to buy a WFL3 snare drum, DM me and get in touch with me. And if you go to the WFL3 website, whatever price is on those snare drums, knock $150 off.
What?
And that'll be your price on the snare drum.
That's like the item of the game. And when you in the Warriors games, they always give away an item of the game, and they have a special discount. And we have an item of the day today.
That's right.
Snare $150 off. That's awesome.
Wow.
Any WFL snare drum that you want today, Adam's going to knock $150 off, but it's for today only. So it's not like it's going to be an ongoing thing. So for today, which is February the 11th, 2025, if you want to order a snare drum at $150 off, DM me. We'll make that happen.
It's
and I tell you what,
2025 already.
I know,
Oh my
right?
God, what happened?
Right? Where did my hair go? What the hell happened? Yeah. So, and I tell you, man, I played one the other night during my clinic. I played one of the aluminum snare drums, and my God, did that drum sound great. And it was a real small room. And so I couldn't blast. I couldn't just wail away. Right. And so, it was a pad class, but I played the drum set quite a bit, and it wasn't too loud in there. Very small room, great sounding drum. So check it out. If you're interested in that, check it out.
Nice.
Those are my good things. So today, because of our good friend and our deck head, Jeff Mann, he sent a thing in via Fred Fisher saying, hey, maybe the guys in deck ought to do something about playing live with a click or playing to backing tracks. And man, do I have something to say about that. So that's what we decided to do, was to have a podcast, today's show, about playing live to a click or backing tracks, because a lot of bands are using backing tracks nowadays. A lot of drummers like to play to a click, and there's a lot more to it when playing live than what I think a lot of people think. So I think it's going to be a great show. So I'm going to throw it over to Jeremy, because Jeremy, you play live a lot, and you do a ton of gigs. And maybe I'm wrong. Do you ever play to tracks, or do you play to a click live? And if so, how do you work it? What do you do?
I don't. For all the gigs I play, like, I'm trying to think of the last time I had to play live with a click track. I can't even remember what it was. So pretty much never is the answer to that. In the studio, once in a while, jazz records, especially smaller group stuff, absolutely happen without a metronome, right? There's this a little bit of elasticity with tempo that's kind of okay. And there's this sort of magic that happens in the moment. And it's so much about paying attention and being responsive. So you don't tend to hear that stuff with a metronome. The stuff that I do have to use a click track for in the studio is more pop stuff, when things are going to be overdubbed later. So you're just getting scratch parts, and they're just getting the drums to start. And then later they're going to add the keys and the vocals and the guitar and the, theremin.
The what?
Yeah, the theremin. You know the theremin.
I knew you. That's what I thought you said. I'm like, what? Where did that came out of left field?
I've actually never played on a recording with a theremin, but I'd like to. So I've only used them in the studio, and then I use a metronome when I'm practicing, but that's a different deal than playing with live performances with backing tracks that are in time,
Right.
and you have to be metronomically perfect. The only thing for my 2 cents, since I have the floor, I'll just say this: like, it's if you're not used, you absolutely need to practice it to get good at it. And it can be really overwhelming if you go into the studio and it's your first time ever doing it. That's a tall
Yes.
order, and you get you frustrated, and it gets you tripping, and you get starting in your head, and then you're not playing comfortably, and that's no bueno. So you need to practice it, and you have to remember that you're not a metronome. You're working to internalize the feeling of steadiness, but a lot of times that feeling can feel very steady and not be metronomically perfect. So in other words, there's a little bit of sort of looseness with your staying with the metronome. Not when Rick plays. I mean, he doesn't miss a freaking hair of a beat, but like when I'm playing live in the studio, I'm not going to stop the track if I hear myself a fraction of a beat ahead on a couple of clicks. I'm going to notice it. I'm going to try to make that very subtle adjustment where I just ever so slightly relax, so I don't keep coming further unglued from the click. Right now, in real time, when you're listening to that back, it's unnoticeable. When you take the click out, drums just sound like they're steady. But that was, so you sort of allow for a little bit of kind of looseness between you and the metronome or the click track in the studio, where you never get more than a fraction of a beat off of it. Incidentally, let me just throw one more thing out, and then I'll leave it to you guys. One of my students just hit me to this new app that I picked up the other day. It's called Beat Mirror, and it's an app that it's like $5, and it will track the tempo of a song, whether you're playing or just a drummer playing live. You can just like hit the button and start playing, or you can actually play a pre-recorded song and just put it through the app and have it analyze, and it'll give you a graph of the tempo, and it'll show you any fluctuations in it, and give you a plus or minus of like the range of where it started, where it stopped, and all that. And so just out of curiosity, I put a bunch of tracks through this to just check it out, like put some Police tunes in there and some Zeppelin and Pretenders, and I was like, oh wow, turns out in every single song there's a little bit of this going on. You can tell which ones were played with a click and which ones weren't, but even the ones with a click, like it's not a perfectly flat line all the way through, but the fluctuations, if you take that away and just listen to the song, it sounds perfectly steady. You feel me?
Yes.
And I agree, and I think that what you just said right there is a show into itself, because it's so easy to jump to jump on my soapbox about that stuff. I mean, yeah.
Well, you guys do more. I mean, Bart, you especially do a lot more playing with click track, and I'm sure you got a lot of experience to share. So
yeah. Well, let me. I want to throw it. Actually, I want to throw it down to Chip now, and here's why. Because Chip, I know you play in a church band, and I know a lot of church bands use tracks, and I didn't know. I don't know if your church does, and if so, if you do, let's hear your stories about it.
Well, my church uses tracks, and each of those tracks has a click and a sound cue that the lady on the sexy sounding lady on the track says drums in.
Yeah.
Chorus, verse. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But it's like playing to a click. I thought about this episode this morning. My eyes popped open. I was like looking forward to it, because playing to a click can be intimidating to younger drummers, especially new drummers that have never really practiced to a metronome before. And
right.
One of the things, to backtrack a little bit, one of the things that I like to do is to get a ball and move the ball up and down or side to side to illustrate the concept that it's important for people to realize that, time on a click track doesn't just come in and out of existence. Time is a continual moving thing. It's one of the reasons I like those old analog metronomes, because they swing back and forth and you can see that movement and predict that movement. There's a feel there, and when I'm playing to a click track, I'm trying to maybe use, like Jeremy said, I'm using it as a guide, not as a dictator.
Mhm.
I'm not all for making sure the snare is on every second and fourth one. I'm making sure that maybe my time is lining up with the total of those 4 beats in 4/4 music. So I'm kind of lined up and I'm using it as a guide to help me play the drums to the music that's on the track and to the music that the band's playing.
Yeah.
So that's where I come in to play with that. Go ahead, Jeremy.
That made me think of something when you talked about the old style metronomes, the pendulum style that swing back and forth, and you can see and predict based on the movement, where it's going to land. One of the things that I think about a lot, I took a great lesson with Daniel Glass during the COVID, and we talked all about what happens in between the strokes, right?
Mm.
The up, right, with the rebound, and then what happens there, and how the consistency of what happens between the strokes is part of what determines the consistency of when the strokes actually hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if
Right.
while you're playing, you're thinking about hitting, and you're trying to like throw these darts to land on these clicks. That's not the way to do it. Your playing's going to be jagged and rough. But if you're thinking about sort of a smoothness and making sure that the upstroke happens to exactly the same height every time, and your stick is constantly in motion and not hitting, jabbing, stopping, pulling up, hitting, jabbing, stopping, pulling up,
Yeah.
interrupting that flow, you're going to be much more likely to sort of kind of coast with the metronome and make those very subtle adjustments just by kind of gently leaning forward or backward, as opposed to thinking about throwing darts and lining up every single note with every single click right in the middle of the click.
Yeah. Yeah.
This might be a bit off of the subject, but it's not really. I think that's what Freddie Gruber talked about a lot too. Is like, is the note is the byproduct of emotion.
Right.
I
Yes.
talk about that a lot in my clinics and my master classes and stuff. So when you throw the stick, what happens on the way to the drum or what happens after you hit the drum is what's important, and so that space in between the notes, that's where the music lies. And I think it's important to think that way. And again, maybe that's a bit off topic, but not really, because that's
Not
I
at all.
think that's where
That's totally on topic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Rick, what about you, bud? Let me hear I want to hear
Well,
your input.
I do agree with Jeremy on how certain styles perhaps don't work out well with a click because it's too rigid, like jazz styles. I feel like blues styles, perhaps some reggae. And I'm sure there's lots of other styles that push and pull can just be a nice thing. And I like to call that human feel.
Mm.
But I've played with clicks so many times in the studio and live. Like my whole life is all about playing with clicks. And I found that I need to be able to work with what the songwriter needs, the producer needs. And a lot of times, my center is like right spot on with that click, and that's where I start. And that is usually what goes over really, really well. And so I think it's important to be able to have that sway where you can give it a little human feel or be just like a metronome, right? Because maybe something was recorded with a drum machine and they want that nuance live, but they want a little bit of human feel. So you've got to find that balance. And I think one of the reasons that a lot of drummers shy away from it, they make up all kinds of excuses. If you're tentative at all about your part, you're not going to be able to lock with the click. And then you bring the click and say that, the click, it's too artificial. It's too machine-like. I'm not a rolling drum machine. It's like, well, you need to be a rolling drum machine for this gig, man.
Mm.
And so you really, really, really have to know your part to be able to lock in with a click. So there's lots and lots of ways that you could, we could all talk about. I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on ways to get better with playing with a click. But I'd say one of the biggest ones when we interviewed Johnny Kelly of Type O Negative, and Quiet Riot, he has so many songs that are so slow that there's all this space between the notes, and it's definitely a fact. Slower is harder to play because it's stripped down. There's so much space. So if you're practicing with a click, don't think, oh, let me just work on trying to play faster.
Yeah.
Really work to play slow, super slow as molasses. But one of the keys is to help you get this is to just really subdivide the feel.
Yep.
As in do an eighth note click in your head, don't be 1, 2, 3. Don't make your click sound like that. Get your click on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it's just a lot easier to follow. Or a super slow song, 2 and a 3 and that's my click. It's like a 16th note click, and that can save the day for the feel, is getting that ability to subdivide. The other thing that I do that really helps me out with my time is a left foot heel tap. I think I've seen all of you guys do it. So my other method is, let's say I'm playing closed hats. Okay, I'm playing a closed hat. My left heel is still tap, 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 tap. That's my other metronome. That balances out my body. And so I've got that left foot tap, right? And so a fast tempo, I'm quarter note tapping with my heel. Slow tempo, I'm doing an eighth note tap. Watch Chad Smith play. Watch any video of Chad Smith play. You're going to see this big giant left leg that's just like this machine tapping away. It's like a built-in metronome. Taylor Hawkins was great with that too.
Phil Collins did that a lot too.
Yeah. And
Bonham, listen to Bonham, man. That hi-hat with the ching ring is always, and he played a lot of eighth note, da 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 da,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Your left foot's your internal pulse, I always say. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Rick.
Yes, absolutely. I love this topic. This is what we talk about all day long here in the studio, and I just think it's so important because, folks, we're the timekeepers. That's really our job.
So I got a question. I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Let me ask each of you, how do you teach a young child how to play along with the metronome? What's your process?
I've got a cattle prod. Electrified at the end, so you feel a jolt.
Every time you come off the click, you try to, bzz, nope, you're off. Bzz, nope, you're off.
There is a metronome that is actually a physical vibrator that you clip onto your belt and gives you a little buzz.
The Soundbrenner Pulse.
Yeah.
I think for what I tell young kids. Oh, sorry. What'd you say?
I said I tried using it once, but it tickled too much. I couldn't deal with it.
I tell everybody, it doesn't matter if it's a young kid or anything, that you first of all, before you ever even try to play with it, you have to internalize the click. You have to internalize the feel of a song.
Yeah.
Right? And let's take the song out of the equation for a minute. Let's talk about what Rick was saying. If you're playing any subdivision, quarter note, eighth note, 16th notes, there's still the pulse to that. Eighth note triplets, swing, whatever. There's still the pulse to it, right? So you have to internalize that. So what I tell everybody is, if I'm just teaching them how to start with a click, let's play some simple eighth notes on a practice pad. Right hand lead, right, left, right, left, right, left. More importantly than the metronome and more importantly than your hands, get your left foot going with the metronomic pulse. And if your left foot is playing a quarter note, then your right hand and your left foot are going to line up. So you play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and make your right hand and your left foot line up. And I tell everybody, don't think, because it's usually people think backwards. They think, okay, I'm playing drums, I've got to get my hands going. So when they get their foot going along with their hands, they're thinking, how do I get my foot to work with my hands? And I tell them, no, don't do that. Get your hands to follow your foot. Your foot's leading the way. So if you have the metronome going, if you put a hierarchy to it, if you will, the click track's telling you, or the metronome's telling you where to go. Your left foot is following your metronome and your hands are following your left foot. And then learn to internalize that and feel that within you. Grease up those gears and feel it within you. Feel the pulse within you.
Yeah.
The thing that I believe a thing that I believe is that in order to play with a band, well, playing with a metronome or playing with a bass player, or in some ways are the same thing.
Yep.
In that you have to pay attention outwardly, and that means if you're putting, it's all a matter of teaching students where to put their focus, where to
Yeah.
pay, how to pay attention and where to pay attention, right? It's like if you were looking at a painting and you just sort of looked at it and just took the whole thing in, that would be one experience of it. But if I said to you, okay, I want you to just focus on the yellow that's in that painting, all of a sudden your brain would make a little shift and you just start to sort of like, it's almost like the yellow would just sort of pop out. You have that ability to train your focus like that and notice just certain aspects of what you're seeing, right?
Yeah.
Similarly with what you're hearing, but in order to do it while you're doing something else, you have to be able to do the thing that you're trying to do comfortably enough. Because if all your brain focus is on just like getting the pattern right, let's say you're playing a groove or whatever,
Yeah.
or a sticking that's not yet under your hands, it's almost impossible to play with a metronome, because you're thinking about right, left, right, left, right, and then like, oh, there's a metronome also, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes I often won't introduce the metronome right away. If someone's learning a new rock beat or a new sticking pattern, we're going through stick control, give me a week practicing without a metronome until you can do it. And then it's comfortable enough that you can actually pay attention to something else because you got the muscle memory, right?
I do that same thing. I think sorry, Chip, I didn't mean to step on you there. I just want to catapult off of what you said. I do the same thing. And I've had drum teachers, maybe some drum teachers will say I'm wrong, but I think that exactly what you said. There's so much going on and you're trying to focus so much on it that I do the same thing. Here, practice it without the metronome, then introduce the metronome, because the metronome is the point of perfection. I'm not. I'm not perfect.
If while you're playing with a metronome, you can't tell me if your right hand hit before the metronome, on the metronome, or after the metronome, then there's nothing else you can do, right? You have to start with that awareness, that comfort with what you're doing, and then awareness to be able to listen and focus in on simultaneity or lack thereof. Otherwise, it's just like the metronome's on, but you might as well be in the next room because you're not.
It's just an annoying sound over here that's bugging you.
It's always an annoying sound, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna say that goes along with becoming a great musician.
Yeah,
the ability to use your ears and have that situational awareness of what's going on around you while you're doing your job is the key, in my opinion, to playing with the click. David Betts is watching. Hi, David. He said, is it best for the whole band to be on the click or just the drummer?
That's a great question. I love that question.
Yeah.
Look, can I jump on that real quick?
Jump in.
Okay. So if you're playing to tracks, obviously I think everybody has to listen to the tracks. The group that I play with, we don't play to tracks. We do everything, but I play to the click. And so first of all, the shout out to, I use the Soundburner Pulse on this old phone, right? And every song that we do, I've gone through and programmed in every single song that we have. Now, the cool thing about using this as an app, shout out to Soundburner there, is that I put together my set lists, and this acts as my set list. It's in a clamp to the side to my left side. Playing to the click live, if everybody hears it, it's going to throw everybody under the bus. It's kind of like what I was saying a minute ago. If, I listen to the click, I count the song in, and the band listens to me. And more to the point of what the subject is of playing to the click live, I think that you have to have conversations have to happen within the group that, hey, we are going to be playing this song to a click live. Case in point, we have a couple of songs in our set that when they were hits, they were a live hit on a live record. And so the song really takes off and moves. So if you learn that song, and you learn it to the live track, you're going to be used to rushing and dragging. And so we've had many conversations within the band that this is where we're playing the song and this is the tempo it's going to be at, and we're going to play to the click. And we've all gotten used to playing it that way. But you have to have everybody on that same page. And because one person might not, they might have a tendency to practice with the live recording, and then they're going to rush. Everybody has to remember, listen to the drums. Listen to the drums. It's a team effort. And again, I'm playing to the click to keep us in time. The other thing, and maybe this is a side note to what David asked, I don't know, but one of the things that I love playing to the click is, let's say that there's a song in that song list that I just showed you guys that we haven't played in a while. And Sam calls an audible. And I'm like, okay, how does it go? Okay, I got the lyric in my head. And I go into my set list and I look it up. And okay, the song's at 106, whatever the song is. Okay, so now I know where to start the song, right? I know where the tempo is. And if I'm kind of faking it because we haven't played it in a while and I'm just like instantly recalling the song, at least I'm in time. And that saved my butt a lot. And then also, I mean, let's face it, we're all human. One night you might be really excited. Oh my God, there's 8,000 people out there and your chest is going and you want to play really fast. And there's nothing worse than the bass player and the guitar player go, my God, would you slow down back there? You know, and it happens. It does. But if you have the click and you can reference it, you know, okay, yeah, this is right where I'm supposed to be. It keeps you in time. And then let's say the polar opposite happens. Man, I'm not feeling good tonight. I got a cold and I just want to get the show over and go home. So now everything's underneath the beat. Well, you always have that reference point to this is where the song's supposed to be. So anyway, I threw a lot at you there. And David, I hope that answers your question.
I think that playing with the click, like getting the whole band on it, is definitely something that should be discussed in rehearsal. I've had some situations where well, with one band in particular, where I was playing to a click. I'm the only one playing to the click, okay? The song, though, starts with guitar. And the guitar starts, and we hit these little accents. Imagine like Eye of the Tiger. Bop, dicka, 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 bop, 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 dicka, 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 that kind of stuff, right? And so if I'm listening to the click and the guitarist doesn't hear a click and there's echo in the room, this kind of stuff could be a disaster because they're not hearing my tempo. So they're hitting the accents off of the click, but I've got the click in my ear. So what I suggested is I have the click in my ear and I'm just like laying down some quarter note hi-hat underneath for a live thing. And then the guitarist can start to my quarter note hi-hat. And then so I've already got that glue. It's sort of like my hi-hat is the click that holds the band together. And that I've done that with bands and it's saved the day. So if there's bad monitoring, everybody's hitting those accents, those crashes or chokes at the same time. But I had one time where they were like, no, dude, we don't want to do that. Why bother with that? And then the guitar is starting and he's playing and you hear, you just hear like a big echo and you're supposed to hit in those accents and you can't even get it. And so, you know, it was a train wreck.
You nailed it, Rick, because I think that everybody has to have that conversation, you know, that, okay, you know, whether or not you're playing to a click even. And so we're maybe a bit off topic, but everybody has to listen to the drummer. So if a guitar player starts a song, I've had this conversation many a time. If a guitar player starts a song and it's whatever it is, the drummer still needs to count it in, because if the guitar player starts a song and I'm just, oh shit, he started the song, and let's say it's not a guitar player. I'm gonna jump to a piano, and we have a piano song that we do where the piano player starts it, and it comes in on the upbeat, right? So the song starts 1, 2, 3, 4, so you're coming in on the and beat of 1.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if he just all of a sudden, and we do these hits like you're talking about, there's accents on the cymbals and they're choked, right?
Yeah.
If he starts it and I'm not ready for that,
Right.
whether there's a click going in my ears or not, if I'm not ready for him to start, again, we're human. All of a sudden, oh shit, he started. Where's the downbeat? Where's the downbeat? It's so easy to miss. So I think there's a certain amount of professionalism within those conversations. Hey, look, I get that the guitar player, you're starting the song, or the piano player, or whoever is starting the song. That's fine. I'm still going to count us in and give us time. I'm going to, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's just, that's a courtesy thing to the music, if you will.
You guys are talking about specific situations where there's
Right.
there's an intro that doesn't start with drums. And if you're going to have a click going on in your ears, absolutely, there's either got to be you counting it in or they have a click also, so that, otherwise you're headed for trouble. But in most situations where that's not the case, where let's say it's just the band, starting off together, I would contend that generally my experience is that nobody else wants to hear the click.
I agree with that. Yeah,
you're hearing it, but it's a burden, right? And it's a responsibility that we bear. But boy, you don't want a singer with a metronome in their ear. Like,
oh God, no.
Right? That's the worst thing for a singer, right?
Yeah.
They have the leeway to be expressive and go, slow and fast, and float a little bit over the bar, over the beat.
Right.
And then the rest of the band, it's hard, right? It's an extra thing to have to listen to while you're trying to listen to everything else. Yeah. And if the guitar player, the bass player, and the keyboard player know that the drummer's rock solid in time, they can just relax into the perfection of your beat, right? Yeah. And so, here's the pocket, and I'm feeling that. And if you have the metronome to keep you steady, then you're going to be good for all those, overdub takes down the road, or for a live performance that stays locked in.
So the general consensus, David, is it's better for just the drummer to be on the click. I'd have to agree with that, because in most of my studio experiences, it's me laying down the tracks, laying down the songs with the bass player, making sure we got our takes, and I'm the only one with the click, and he's playing off of me. That's what I've experienced.
That's what me and Greg refer to as laying the concrete. It's just that's the way it is. And I do think too that and again, back to the conversations, and maybe not to a specific point of a song like you were saying, Jeremy, but I think everybody in the band has to be aware that if the drummer's playing to a click, you really have, or not playing to a click, let's take that out of the situation for a second. You have to listen to what the drums are doing, because there's so many times where, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I'm sure we've all run into this. Please, I would love to hear your guys' take. Oh man, and everybody wants to, maybe I'm on my soapbox a bit here, but everybody wants to blame the drummer for stuff. Oh, the drummer's too rigid. He's just right with the click, and it's too rigid. His time's too rigid. The drummer, your time is floating too much. You're not, your tempo's bad. You have to, as a drummer, it's our responsibility to play and give the tempo and to set the pace for the song and to lay the concrete, as I said, that Greg and I said. But it's everybody's responsibility within the band to have good time.
Absolutely.
And there are certain, I think, instruments that lend themselves to not having good time. So you have to practice with the metronome, and you have to have good time. Like the theremin? Yeah. The theremin, yeah. Theremin players are the worst, man.
Yeah, very hard to think.
I toured with a theremin player one time, and let me tell you.
One of my students came up with this. We were working with the click, and he said, "Wow, playing without the click is kind of like being in the forest without a compass."
Well, Mary Fisher has a comment that related to that. She says, in the competitive world of drum corps, you won't hear a group not practicing with the metronome. They're so good at it that once they turn it off for competitions, you can feel that they can feel the tempo through the muscle memory or whatever you want to call.
The producer.
I knew a studio, famous, a local drummer here in the Bay Area who played with Sheryl Crow and a bunch of other top touring artists. And his approach with it was he always practices with a metronome and he never plays with one.
That can work too.
Yeah. So sort of similar, like, you know, you just get that muscle memory, you just get the feeling of what the song feels like with the click, practice. And then, you know, from doing it so many hundreds of times, when you do it live, you just have that feeling.
Yeah. I had a drum teacher, my first drum teacher, Fred Hayes, shout out to Fred. He played to a click and was showing me the metronome, and he could adjust his hi-hat, his bass drum, and his snare in different positions ahead or behind of the click and make the click sound like it was speeding up.
Yeah.
He can make it sound like it was going slower.
Right.
He was just like a master of time.
Yes.
And I remember when he showed me that stuff, all those little nuances blew me away. Like in the song Back in Black by AC/DC, the snare drum is just a smidge behind. Everything else is dead on, and the snare drum is a smidge behind, which lends it to the song. It gives it this depth and this swing to it. So there's a whole art form in playing to a click. It's something that you need to be able to do, I believe, if you want to be a professional drummer. It's not something you have to do all the time in a professional context, but it's definitely a skill set you don't want to ignore.
No doubt. I mean, I've definitely had those like, hey man, that sounded really good, that recording you just did, but can you play it a little bit more behind the beat?
Right.
And when they say a little bit behind the beat, they're not saying playing it slower. You're still playing with
consistency. Yeah.
It's like the snare is a little staggered, you know? Like, I'm sure, Jeremy, you do a lot of that with like a lot of your New Orleans drumming, right? It's sort of like you're teasing the beat. John Bonham was known for playing so behind the beat. Blues drummers play behind the beat. And that's a subtle kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it is subtle.
Ultimately, I feel like, I mean, this is, by the way, guys, just as an aside, this is what my whole basic presentation is about. So if it gets accepted, they'll do a whole thing about this, or half of it, I should say. Yeah, and you know, they're well-known drummers say, oh, that guy plays behind the beat, or that guy's always on top of it. And though that may be true, people have tendencies of how they like to feel things. Really, you want to be like a chameleon. I mean, you want to be able to fit the moment depending on the session and depending on the vibe of the song. If you're playing a song about rocking down the highway, you're not playing. You better not be playing behind the beat.
Very well said. Yeah.
You know, but if you're playing sitting on the dock of the bay, you better not be playing on top of the beat. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're not supposed to rush that one?
Yeah. You know, it's all about a feeling, and a feeling has to fit the emotional intent of the song.
Right.
And part of how you dial that in is by deciding where you're going to sit in the pocket, and that can be square on. You know, it can be slightly ahead, it can be slightly behind, and really good drummers, like Chip was saying, kind of live in that space between the front edge of the beat and the back edge of the beat. And like Rick was saying, you know, he called it staggered, but it's not staggered where you could hear it like a flam. You know, it's like, it's so subtle. It's like the peak of the middle of my note, let's call my note, you know, the bass drum and the hi-hat simultaneously, let's say, versus the peak of the note on the bass guitar, which of course is a different physical move, right? It's pulling a finger across a string, which is turned into an electrical signal, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the peaks of those notes, like if you were to look at them on Pro Tools, let's say, to see where they line up, sometimes you'll see the peak of one is just ever so slightly ahead of the peak of the other. Now that's when it's magnified. So that's like, you know, really, really, but in real life, you can't even, it's hardly perceptible. Or at a certain point, it becomes perceptible. And that's the kind of what we're talking about. The front edge versus back edge of the beat is that point where it becomes just slightly perceptible that one person's giving the song a forward momentum by playing on the front edge of the beat versus on the back edge.
I think that, yeah, it will change the whole perception. Like you said, Back in Black. I think in its being laid back, it propels the song, because it's so, when you listen to Back in Black, there's not anything subtle about that song. They mean every note, but it's a slow song, you know, right? And so I tell all of my students, think about the time as you hear. Look, we we think here, we feel here, right? So the song has you and it's guiding you. If you have the song strapped to your back and you're trying to pull it and you're ahead of the beat, you're the drummer where everybody's going, dude, chill out a little bit, mellow out, and you don't want to be that guy. You want to hold that time and feel it. And so that's why I think let the time show you where to go. Don't pull it along.
I like the word you used in there, Bart. You said propelled or propulsion. That's one of my favorite words when I talk about drumming. Like, I feel like that's the drummer's job. Like 99% of the time is to propel.
Yeah.
And you can propel, with the laziest, swampiest backside of the beat, zoom, ga, bazoom, bazoom, ga. Or you could do it on the total opposite. And either way, the music has kind of a forward motion, right? But it's depending on the feeling of the motion. Again, rocking down the highway or sitting on the dock of the bay.
Yeah.
I have wanted to ask you guys this question for years, so this is really, really great to see your thought of describing this playing behind or ahead of the beat and see if this makes sense to you. Because I think perhaps it does. Let's say we're playing to a click, 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 click. Well, C-L-I-C-K. Well, if you're behind the beat, you're hitting the K, click. If you're on the top of the beat, click at the very first, and then somewhere in the middle. Does that analogy resonate with you guys at all? Like, think of click, like it's at the end, and maybe that's where the snare would go for a behind the beat feel.
I like that analogy, but it's in 5 parts, not 4. I'd rather have 4 parts.
I can only count to 4, so I don't even know what you're talking about.
I can't spell, so I'm screwed.
I'm talking about like a visual. Well, where does that note?
Yeah, where does that note go? I understand.
I think visuals are important, and this might be off the point of the click, maybe, but I always tell people, again, this may not work, but I tell students that if you're trying to land the beat of a note, right, like 1 and 2 and think about visually the and beat of 2 and 3. They're a foot apart, and you're trying to put the beat at the 6-inch spot, right, dead center, right, if you're playing 16th note subdivisions. So I think the visual works. So I think there can be a way to come up with, like, okay, you're playing with the click and you're right on it, or you're a little bit ahead of it or a little bit behind it. There can be a visual thing. Yeah. So
yes, yeah, but I have to say the click CLICK thing doesn't resonate with me exactly, but the concept does. The concept totally does.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the nice things about teaching and talking about drums is, like, sometimes somebody says something in a certain way, it's like, that totally makes sense, and I'm sure for some people that works, Rick. So like,
yeah.
Good. But like, here's one thing that I think is important to think about. Like, we think about clicks or pulses as having like an instantaneous duration, and of course they're not, right? Even when I snap my fingers, as short and staccato as that sounds, if we were to record that in Pro Tools and then magnify it, it would have a beginning, and then it would get bigger. The sound wave would get bigger and have a peak, and then it would trail off at the end.
Right.
You all seen those things on Pro Tools, like the sound wave, right? It's like this.
Yeah.
And so if you think of it that way, as everything is having a duration, well, there's the very middle of the of that snap, there's the front edge of the snap, and there's the back edge of the snap.
Yeah.
And you can line things up, so that they're exactly precise or slightly ahead or slightly behind. And I'll say this too, the more people that are involved that are trying to play something simultaneously, the harder it becomes to do it exactly. So imagine you're in a giant room of 100 people, and you clap your hands, and you start clapping your hands, and you ask one person to clap with you. Well, that's pretty good. Like, you can stay pretty dang locked in to 2 people clapping simultaneously if they've got reasonable time, right? And then you add 5 more people, and now the clap gets a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
And it starts a little sooner, and the last clap lasts a little bit, later. And then there's 100 people, and now it's like rap, rap, right? Like, from the start of the first clap to the end of the last clap, it's a long clap.
Like, We Will Rock You. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so think about that in a band. Like, this is part of why in an orchestra there's a conductor. with all those people, it's like, hey, here's the downbeat where I knock the baton down to the bottom of the stroke, and everyone's okay. So we're going to stay in together because there's so many people to corral to feel the time the same way.
I think that
I want to, before we end, I want to let everyone know the best reason why to play to a click track. Because in rehearsal, you can make a note, okay, this song is 110 beats a minute, and you write it down and you play to it. And then when that guitarist comes back to you and says you're rushing, you rush that song. It's like, no, I wrote it down in rehearsal when you said it was perfect at 110, and I played it at 110. It's just your adrenaline. And
Yeah.
you're going to have a consistent show with if you write down all of these tempos. And believe me, there are so many gigs where this is an absolute required skill. I think it's going to happen more and more. We're playing along to backing tracks all the time. There's audio, or there's a video stuff. There's pyrotechnics. All this stuff has to be synced up, and it's all going to come from you and your position as the drummer.
And when it's not synced up, it's also, like somebody's already mentioned, but I feel like it's worth mentioning again. It's very important to have other musicians with their own very solid concept of time.
Yep.
And the ability for the bass player to know how to play in time is critical for any bass player, for any musician.
I would be remiss if I didn't throw these one quick story and two quick stories out. What to catapult off of what Rick said with video stuff. This was 100 years ago. I mean, this was back in the early 2000s when I told you guys I played with that band with the Star Trek actors, and it was put together with Paramount Pictures. And dude, the video stuff that went along with that band was, I mean, it was top. It was Paramount Pictures, for God's sakes. And it was so, you had to be, when the Martian's head hit the body, you had to hit the downbeat. You had to be there. I've also talked on the show about a lot of the re-records that we've done over the years with for sync licensing with my band. And they want you on the click. Now, here's one of the things that we haven't talked about today, and I'm throwing it at the end, so maybe this is another subject, but if you're playing a song and you're re-recording a song, and the producer, the powers to be, whoever it is, they want it to the click, but the original song was either cut to a click, or maybe the center part of the song, the bridge is not to a click, and the click comes back in, whatever. When you try to cut the song to a click, and you're used to hearing the song do this, the first few times that you either re-record it or just play it that way, it's going to feel so foreign to you. It's going to feel so weird. Now, this comes back to what we're saying. I think there are certain songs that I think about the time having an elasticity to it, like a rubber band. It holds its shape, but it stretches. And some songs feel best that way. We have songs within our set that, we want to start it here, but the song has to move. So start the song at the tempo, turn off the click, and then just hold on to the tempo. There's been times when we've taken that very same song that I'm thinking of in my head and we've re-recorded it. It's like, okay, no, here in the bridge where it normally slows down, we're going to play it we're going to record it to the click, and you listen back to it, and oh my God, it sounds so sterile. It's just like,
well, that's what I was talking about.
And again, that's a whole other show, but just be aware of that, because that you can find yourself in that position, and you just have to be able to do it. And I've had to do it. So just be aware.
That's a good, for those of you who tuned in halfway through the show, we talked in the beginning about elasticity of tempo and how different styles, that's a common occurrence. And that, like, jazz recordings are very rarely recorded with a metronome. And that even some of the most well-known tracks that you're familiar with, classic rock, whatever, many of them have variations in the tempo that kind of feel natural. It's not really until, I mean, there's obviously some stuff that was recorded with a click. It became more and more prominent as time went on. I think, like, there was some stuff in the 70s, and then the more modern the music got, the more click track sort of made its way into the common usage. So yeah, but that's also part of why we like the older stuff, because it has that human kind of quality, like Rick was talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's not a debate. Our episode was about playing with a click track, so it's not to
Right.
click
Yeah.
or not to click. It's we're
Right.
talking about when you do click.
Right.
Click.
How do you do it? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
How do you click with the click, baby?
Right.
click with the click, man. I think that's a great topic, and thanks again for Jeff Mann for this suggestion. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate all of your suggestions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you have an
Absolutely.
idea about something you'd like to hear us discuss, or you want to be part of the discussion, just let us know. Drop us a line. A quick reminder, we have our registration is now open for our Deck Day event on April 26th. That's going to be in Southern California at the Aquarian Drumheads Warehouse. It's going to be a day of drum clinics and drum hanging and free giveaways and lots of drum gear and fun stuff. And then Bart, you want to remind everybody about the snare drum thing today?
Yeah, exactly. So today, if you tuned in late, for today only, which again, what's the day today? The
11th.
11th of February, 2025. For today only, if you DM me, you will get and you want to buy a WFL3 snare drum, you'll get $150 off of any price that is on their website. So if there's a snare drum that you want to buy, and I highly recommend them, they're amazing snare drums, go on there, find it, $150 off, DM me, and we can make that happen.
DM Bart Robley.
So
And if you can't DM Bart Robley, go to bartrobley.com. There's contact info on the website.
Yes, and that is, again, that's for today only. So if you're hearing this on the 12th, you're out of luck.
Too late. You're too behind the click.
Too far. You're way off the click, man. You're a day behind.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your great
guys.
input.
Thanks, guys.
Keep
Thanks,
practicing.
guys. All right.
We lost Jeremy. Uh-oh.
Not only did we lost Jeremy, but he didn't hit the end button. So
end
we're
button.
still live.
Still doing the show.
We're still doing the live.